And we are live once again. Welcome everyone to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, and joined back in his own home is Brian McNicoll.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
You could probably almost do that in your by
You know what? I
memory.
used to have to read it, and I don't have to read it anymore.
How long have we been doing that line now? That's what it is.
At long last.
All right. Well, welcome back to the DMV, Brian. I hope you had a great trip with the family. Got to see a part of America.
We did. We had a great trip.
Terrific.
Swam in some like clean mountain rivers, and since we didn't have baseball, we went for swimming holes, and it was really beautiful. Really a side of America you don't see.
Yeah, this is the thing about the pandemic. I mean, it's forced us to change a lot of things, and it's brought out a lot of interesting things and people. And the Wall Street Journal wrote about this the other day, as a matter of fact, about one of the things that has happened is there's been like a boom in camping. The problem is that not everybody knows how to camp.
That's
and,
right.
and so they setting up the tent and doing other things. And there was in this article, I thought it was rather amusing. I think this person was from Chicago area or whatever. And anyway, she was going with some friends, and they were going to go hiking and camping. And she knew weight was really important. So they said, we're not going to do the sleeping bags. The weather's supposed to be pretty good. But they didn't account for the fact of what happens when you go camping in mountains at night. How the temperature can drop. And
Right.
She said, I've never been so cold in my entire life. It's like, this is what happens when you make those rookie mistakes, kind of a thing like that. You think you can do this, and then you just totally mess it up. So I will not say that I'm a good camper. You will not find me doing this on a general basis. But I enjoy watching others and their travails.
Right. I would, it's a beautiful thing. I'm glad people could do it and enjoy it. And I have done it, but I have a CPAP machine now. So I got to be where you can plug stuff in. Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of glad I'm not having to do anything related to scouting anymore. that has now like saved me from having to, like, yes, I'll take my son and we will do this, thing, whatever. But so, I'm glad that is well behind me.
That's one of those things that you mentioned that is before we get into what we're going to do. My son was interested in that, and we didn't do it because by the time he was interested in it, they had started to go through the political upheaval that eventually destroyed it, right? It destroyed Boy Scouts. And it was like we'd had a couple of bad experiences with Girl Scouts with my daughter. So we just told him no. It's one of the few things that wholesome activities. And he's real good about picking good things to do. And it's one of the few times we've told him no, but it just, I didn't want to get involved in all that. I didn't want to be getting asked to support things I don't support. And so we just kind of stayed out of it.
Yeah. And I think unfortunately now the sheen on, for Eagle Scout is gone. I mean,
right. It was a big deal. When I was on the Hill, that was, we'd sit and do those scheduling meetings. Where will the boss be? Right. And there was always, he made room for Eagle Scout presentations. It was a thing, the congressman himself did that, right. And met with the guys and so forth and he himself was an Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
It was a real, that's a, get you into Harvard credential, huge thing, huge value that Boy Scouts had and basically, threw away in the name of political correctness.
Yeah. No, I know in hiring, we would definitely give higher priority, another look at someone who was an Eagle Scout versus someone who wasn't, because to me and to others that spoke of, hard work, integrity, all these kind of values that we wanted. And unfortunately, like you said, political correctness, no one recognizes what the Boy Scout is, the organization is today. It's a mess.
Sad.
It is
destroyed by, hard to say, put it any other way, but, bad people on the other side.
Yep. Okay. So now as we do our weekly countdown here. So now we're down to 62 days before the election. Things are definitely heating up, right? I mean, we're definitely seeing the rhetoric and all the barbs and everything flying back and forth. But before we get into that, let's talk about schools and reopening. So Maryland
Well, I want
started.
to say something about the 62 days before
Yeah.
we move on. So once you go inside of 60 days, the Justice Department has this guideline. It's not really a rule that says that it won't introduce any political prosecutions, right? That weren't expected. They won't pop up with October surprises and so forth. So the deadline is Friday for John Durham, whatever the Attorney General Barr is working on. If they don't announce it this week, then all that, this is about Comey and John Brennan and all those guys, it can't come out. If it does, it will look political and it will actually hurt the president. So, we don't hear anything on those investigations in the next 3 days, today, tomorrow, or Friday. We should not and will not hear anything about them that provides any meaning to the election. And you can say, I'm sure if you're a Democrat watching this, you're like, they shouldn't be bringing this up now, right? They've had forever to bring it up, which is true, right? This is 4 years now since this happened, 2 years since the end of the Mueller investigation, right? So we've had plenty of time to identify the enemies and investigate what needs investigating. They've added on things to this investigation, continually brought in more U.S. attorneys to look at various aspects of it. So they're going to have a big pile of evidence that they're going to, if they don't introduce it by Friday, it will be something for them to talk to their grandkids about because no one else will know about it. Now, the problem with that is, we should be making these electoral decisions with this information in hand, right? Good, bad, or different. It may say, John Brennan and Jim Comey did nothing wrong, and they had plenty of reason to suspect Trump was involved with the Russians, and everything here was properly predicated, and they're exonerated, right? We need to know if that's true. I don't think that's true, but I don't know, and no one else does, and we need to know that before we decide to vote. And now, we're about, I think, 16, 17 days from early voting starting for the presidential election. It's not really 62 anymore. It's down to about 17 days. So if they know something, if they have things, actionable things that the American people ought to be weighing in about how the last administration performed. The last administration, the vice president of that administration is the Democrat nominee this time. So if they did something good, bad, or indifferent, we need to know now, right? No more expansions, no more still looking at things, tired of hearing about how tight-lipped and efficient they are. Either give it to us by Friday or, it's going to just be you've wasted your time and you've wasted a lot of taxpayer dollars. And I'm going to be one of the people that wants answers on what did we spend all this money on?
Right. And you've been talking about this, on the show here quite a bit over time. You've been watching this very closely. So I'm going to assume that you're going to be a little bit skeptical as to whether or not Durham is actually going to announce anything because they've taken this long. You still hold out a little hope?
Well, no, yeah. There's been some indications that there's stuff to come this week, but it needs to come this week. Now, if like the opening ante comes this week and more follows, that's fine because the idea that this has produced fruit, criminal investigations, criminal indictments, and so forth. Once that's been introduced, people can assume that more will come out, right? That kind of you don't really violate the 60-day rule, and it's not really a rule, but if you don't this week, then it's going to look, and the Democrats are going to characterize it and not totally wrongly as meddling with the election.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're basically saying, if they announce a few things, that at least opens the door and keeps it open for the rest of the time. But They have to do this by Friday. Otherwise, it's game over on this and it really won't have any effect on the election at that point.
Right.
And,
I don't really know that it'll have a lot of effect on the election anyway, but, whatever effect it has, we need to know.
Right. No, and that's a good point, is that just that with early voting coming fairly soon here in the next 2.5 weeks or whatever in some places, not having this information out there, can affect it. We don't, like you said, we don't really know how much an effect it will have. I do tend to think that the people who are going to do the early voting, it's going to be the base on both sides. They have already made up their decision. Nothing is going to change their mind. They're just going to get it out of the way and they're going to do it. But and that it's whatever that percentage of undecided and the people that can still swing one way or the other and break one way or the other. We need to have that information for them.
Right. I also think at some point, some deep-pocketed conservatives need to pay some lawyers to challenge the principle that you can vote weeks in advance of a presidential election. The Constitution says first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. It doesn't say start in September and mail them in whenever you want.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, what's to stop them in theory from the states from adjusting things, and the next thing you know, you'll be voting in August or July, right. Or you'll just have this open, which is just absolutely ludicrous when you think about it.
Right, and you have you say what you want. You have two candidates that are in their mid 70s. Biden's what 78 or something, right? And Trump's 74, and so do we. We're going to get more information on who's healthy enough to do this job between now and November, right? How many times will Biden flub his speech like he did yesterday in Pittsburgh? How many of those would you have to see to where you thought, even though you may support Biden, he's not mentally up to the job, right? So all that information doesn't get, or Trump, right? Trump, there's, I guess, Joe Lockhart trying to claim Trump had a stroke or something. There's been, I guess they hauled out the White House doctor to say this is nonsense. And, it comes right after several cognitive episodes by Biden. So, you can bake into it what you want, right? Read into it what you want. But, we need to know. And the performance of these guys on the campaign trail under pressure, answering questions, getting out of their basement and so forth over the next 2 months should be weighing into people's decision of who to vote for.
Okay, since you have gone that way, we'll continue on that path and come back to the other stuff. All right, so yeah, on this stroke, the mini stroke thing by Lockhart, for which the president has said CNN should fire him for this. But the other thing was that Sanjay Gupta, the doctor from CNN, also weighed in on this and he also kind of kept that whole thing flowing. To the point even that where Vice President Pence had to say, I don't recall being on standby over at NIH and everything like this. But this is kind of a way for the Democrats, right, for the liberals to try to throw a monkey wrench in here. It's like, okay, the Republicans and Donald Trump have been challenging Joe Biden's mental fitness, so we will go after Donald Trump's physical fitness and throw into question, did he have some strokes? Is he capable of doing this? Is there a danger?
Hooked on Adderall? I mean,
right? Yeah.
It's always something, and I think they know that none of this is true, but they don't really care.
Well, yeah, and we are in a campaign season, so we're going to see a lot of stuff said, mud flung around, whatever, by both sides. People want to see what sticks and what gets, catches some attention. Since we are definitely in a campaign that evolves around Facebook and Twitter and a lot of social media aspects, these things, it doesn't take very long for someone to make a statement and it just takes off now. It continue every election. It just seems to be that social media's influence, or at least ability for things to get out there quickly, happens even faster and faster. And so it just kind of makes your head spin about this. There's no chance to even deny it. You can't even take a breath because it's already out there and has been retweeted 1,000 times or something like that.
Right.
So you just mentioned Biden in Pittsburgh. Explain a little bit about his performance there.
Well, so they flew him to Pittsburgh from Wilmington, which is not a long flight. He gave a 12-minute speech. He handed 3 boxes of pizza to some guy. There were 18 supporters there. He did not greet the 18 supporters for some reason, couldn't fit that into the schedule. He marched off after his speech without answering any questions. He during the speech, he broke down talking about the 2 or 3 points in the speech, lost his place, forgot where he was and just started babbling. If that was their effort to show that he's, mentally strong and everything, it's fair to say that it backfired. Speech was just a screed against Trump, nothing really there to.
Yeah, and the thing too is, I mean, 12 minutes is not a very long speech. Definitely not a long speech compared to things that President Trump can do. But right. 12 minutes, I wonder if that's also part of the, the whole protection aspect of Biden is that, okay, 12 minutes. How much can he flub in 12 minutes? We'll give him those prepared speech, 12 minutes. The longer he goes on, the more chances there are to make errors. So let's shorten it up, reduce that opportunity, and yet he still screws up.
Right. That's right. If you can watch him do that and still think that he's cognitively, and it's not just that, and this is happening every time he appears in public, and I think one of the most effective ads that I've seen, and the Trump campaign has really come up with some good ads. And Biden campaign has had a couple too. But that was the one showing him speaking in 2016 and then speaking now, right? And the decline is noticeable just in the last 4 years. His speeches were stronger, his acumen was more, he was aware and alive and so forth. And it seems like he's struggling now just to hang on.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. And that's one of the ways that you can kind of compare and contrast and say there is a difference. And you don't have that problem with Trump, because Trump can just go on and he's strong from start to finish. But what about this whole issue though? Biden not taking questions from the media. Is this going to be part of the thing too? Is that they're going to try to avoid having the media ask him questions? How long can they legitimately dodge this?
They're doing it. They're stiffing the Sunday shows. Chris Wallace, I know the people on the right, they all hate Chris Wallace, but, he has actually been the main person to call them out about this. And he's like, how can you run a campaign from a basement? How can you not, come out and answer questions? And I guess he had the deputy or assistant deputy press secretary or something on last week, and he was asking the lady, it's like, can he do that? Said, well, the science says stay in the basement. It's like, okay, so he's going to Pittsburgh. Did the science change? And she's like, well, he's got to get his message out there. They know that this is an issue. There's more than 60% of people in the country, including a lot of people who plan to vote for Biden anyway, are questioning his mental ability. So, they need to address this. And I don't know how they do it other than, you got to march him out there and let him handle questions. And if he can't, then we know what we know.
Yeah, also, there's a lot of questions from people about the campaign strategy, because I believe that Biden has not visited Wisconsin since October of last year. Granted, we've had 5-6 months of the pandemic that have kind of kept people from going anywhere, but there was still a period between October, so to say January, early February. He could have done that.
Not many people go to Wisconsin.
No, they don't. But still, you could do something. You could find a way to do something to remind me. But now. There's been a long absence, and I'm not sure exactly when Biden's planning on doing it, but I think it worries some of the Democrats about, they kind of see that deja vu feeling about the Clinton campaign, where they kind of didn't pay attention to those states, Michigan and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and they lost him. So, good for Joe that he went to Pittsburgh, but I'm not sure that he did himself a whole lot of good yet, by going there until he comes off strongly. I don't know that it works very well.
Right. And Trump's events have a lot of people there, right? And the media comes on and tuts about, they're not wearing masks, they're not social distancing, they're also not dropping dead, right? They're getting tested. These people are not sick. And, Biden's, he had the press was in this event in Pittsburgh. They have little circles and there's chairs and circles, maybe 5-6 people that you can see in the pictures. That's no energy. People can see, like, there's no enthusiasm around this. The enthusiasm count is something like 81 to 24. 81% of Trump's voters are enthusiastic about voting for him, and like 24% of Biden's are. So, if it rains on election day, to those 24%, how many people say, I'm not going over there for this. He's not really even on my side, So it's like votes, Biden's fighting, votes that will go to Trump and votes that won't happen, right? He has two problems there, because the people who are voting for Trump consider it life and death, and they will crawl across burning glass, to get there to the polls to vote.
Yeah. So let's talk about the kind of compare and contrast then. The DNC. We talked a little bit last week about the DNC convention that had been finishing, and we were halfway through the RNC convention. So now we've had a chance to look at both conventions. It did, to me, I don't know, I guess it's my own inherent bias showing up. I did feel that, at least on the RNC convention, that it was more upbeat, more kind of patriotic, or more pro-American than the DNC was. But, the Republicans have the advantage of going last, so you can fix things and you can try to see what you want to do and make adjustments. But, the idea that MSNBC, political correspondent who was filling in for Joy Reid, there's her name, Tiffany Cross, I think it was, came out and, and talked about all the people of color and the blacks that spoke at the RNC convention and compared it to a minstrel show. Okay, because she's black, she can get away saying that, right?
Right.
But it's outrageous that she says this when, for just doing this. I mean, I get, she could have used the phraseology, could have said Uncle Tom, but minstrel show is, that's even to me a lot harsher. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, you grew up in the South, but I mean, this is like, holy cow. It's like,
you told black people they were in a minstrel show. That does not go over well.
Yeah, right.
So I want to read you this. This is a lead from the front page of the Washington Post this morning. I think this guy's probably been disappeared, and the editor allowed this in. He's probably got concrete shoes on right now, about to go for a swim in the Potomac. Last week's Republican convention had just concluded when Joe Biden's top strategists began hearing from worried Democrats. They told the officials that President Trump's singular focus on a law and order message, coupled with images of violence in cities, threatened Biden's standing, particularly among white voters in the industrial Midwest. He also had a bunch of people people of color on there. So when the convention ended, the first polls out, like his support among African Americans went up by a third. Okay, so he's now, multiple polling organizations are saying that he has 20, 25, 30% of the black vote, right? And you look at these campaign events, there are a lot of black people there, and they're having fun, right? So, like, I don't know, you saw the video yesterday. There's this, I don't know if you've seen this guy. There's this huge black guy who's a huge Trump fan. He's going all around the country doing it. I mean, his biceps are like that big around. It's a giant man. And, he has a blast, right? And he meets people in all these places, and they're talking and laughing and having fun. And it's multiple black people in the photos, right? And they're all having fun, and they're all talking about, like you said, this is fun. So now if you're a black person and you're watching this, your question is sort of, can I be for these guys? Because, none of my fellow people are, right? And, yes, they are, right? It's starting to become okay, right? Because it's getting so much exposure from these other people, and they look like they're having fun. And they also look like, because you'll see white people come up to them and they're like, hey, how you doing? And they're getting embraced, So, I think that if he won with 8% last time, they're saying he could get 30 or 40% now. If he gets 20%, that's 40 states. He flips Virginia. He flips, as I saw you have on your list, the military poll, right? I guess Biden emerged ahead in a military poll. I'm a little skeptical of that, but if that's true, that does mitigate some of the, Virginia's the most military state. More military people live and work in Virginia than any other state. So, that could hurt Trump in Virginia. But if he has 20% black vote, he wins this state. He wins New York. he wins the whole upper Midwest. That's just the figures. That's just the numbers.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought in general the speakers at the RNC convention that were that come under that People of Color banner from Nikki Haley and her Indian heritage, Tim Scott's speech which was terrific, Burgess Owens. I didn't realize that as a former NFL that he had lost his money, his what he had made, and then he was working as a chimney sweep for a while, and he's bounced back, and he's in a very tight race out there in Utah, and so he something a winnable seat for the Republicans.
He's trying to win it's Utah 1. It's usually held by the Democrat, right? It's like the city of Salt Lake.
It encompasses a lot of Salt Lake. Mia Love had it for 2 terms, but she was not an effective congresswoman at all.
Right.
That was so when she lost to McAdams. They have generally had conservative Democrats holding that seat, but it is possible. I mean, Owens is if he wins, I mean he could have a long stay there. I think because I think he'd be much more effective than Mia Love ever was. He's been more involved in a lot of things, so he's good. And then Herschel Walker. Who also said later that he'd lost a lot of friends for his support of Trump. But you just had, Alice Johnson, who I guess originally, her sentence was commuted by Trump, right? Because of Kardashian. And then she was given a full pardon.
Right. This was past week. And attacked by BLM.
Yeah. No. And so
that would seem to be what, your stated goals are, right? Is let's look at who's really a criminal and who's really not, and let the people who are not really criminals out of prison, right? Isn't that basically the story of Alice Johnson? She, played a small part in a drug dealing organization and got a huge life sentence, right? And that's her story, right? And so now she's out of prison and she's been pardoned, right? So, I mean, that's what is it that Black Lives Matter is asking for that the Alice Johnson story doesn't fulfill?
Yeah, no, I mean, it bothers me and has bothered me for a long time that just when you get these very, smart, intelligent, eloquent, Blacks and other people of color speaking, talking about why they're going to support the Republican Party or a particular candidate, the Democrats, the liberal media, they always have this kind of knee-jerk reaction that no, it can't be. They can't think for themselves. Something has happened there.
I have some 2 very smart Black friends have told me these polls are crazy, that they don't see they see Trump getting 2 to 4% of the Black vote. So they're not dumb people. They're obviously talking to more Black people day in and day out than I am. So something to bear in mind, we could be getting, I'm really scared about, we're getting fooled by polls, right? Remember in 2016, I can still see Bob Beckel, this race is over, right? And there was all these polls, Hillary up 8, Hillary up 6, Hillary up 10, Hillary up 12. This is a blowout, and our people are starting to talk like that without being ahead in the polls. Biden still has a national lead in the polls, right? I mean, all the major polls. It's possible that they're all wrong. It's possible, they're all D+6, D+8, outside of the, what the voter data suggests and so forth. We have a lot of good excuses why we think Biden's ahead, right? And perhaps doesn't deserve to be. But the fact is, he's still ahead, right? We're spiking the football and we're behind.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. And, I think even to a certain degree, the journalists, people from the New York Times that are on the 538 podcast, they're continuing to hedge their bets. After 2016, they don't want to just, they're not willing to really declare this, that Biden will win this. They are still.
They are being much more careful about their rhetoric on, the polls say Biden's going to kill Trump, right? But we see, I guess there was a Democracy Institute poll that the UK, The Guardian or somebody ran on Sunday that had Trump ahead by 1 point and ahead in all the battleground states. It's like, oh, it's over. We won. We haven't won. That's a long way to go.
Yeah.
It should win. Looks like indicators are headed Trump's way. right? It does look like there's a big enthusiasm gap. The final results, I was telling you last week, we were counting the bumper stickers and everything, and it ended up, I don't know where we left off talking about this, but it ended up 57 bumper stickers, yard signs, billboards, whatever, for Trump to 13 for Biden. And this was going from DC to Erie to Cleveland to Indianapolis to Cincinnati to through Kentucky to Western North Carolina, Asheville area. Hey, that's where we went, came back to DC. It ended up 57 to 13. And of the 13 for Biden, 7 of them came in one neighborhood right by Butler University. And even in that neighborhood, there were more signs for Black Lives Matter than actually for Biden. So, if we had not gone to see Butler University, it would have been 57 to 6.
Yeah.
So, that's it's not a scientific poll, right? And you can put some of it down to where we were, right? But you can't put a whole lot of it down. I mean, we went to places that are pretty much, at least moderate, if not, blue. So, Asheville is a very conservative city, and we saw one Biden sign there. So
interesting. All right. The other thing too is that
let's say conservative, liberal.
Liberal, yeah, right, yeah, that's true. They're kind of like Austin, Texas, a very artsy,
right? Kind of run down, not like what it used to be.
Yeah,
not in good shape.
Yeah. So I was going to say on the Biden speech. I mean, one of the things he was saying too is that he's now gone out, and accused President Trump really of fomenting violence. So is that the tack? Yeah, is that the tack the Democrats are going to try to rely on? I mean, how does that play?
Yeah, they, a memo went out, and they all went and wrote, hey, this is the, he keeps saying, when he gets to be president, he's going to stop the violence. He is president. Why don't he stop the violence? It's like, okay, if he goes and stops the violence, you're going to say, hey, 10th Amendment, these mayors and governors don't want him there, So they think they have him in a box. But the fact is, people know what's going on. They know that these protesters are not out there supporting Trump, right? They're out there supporting, to the extent they're supporting a candidate, the candidate is Biden, right? And they know that they are, whose staff bailed those guys out of jail. It was not Trump's staff, it was Biden's staff. Kamala Harris has told, her followers to contribute to an organization that bails out these thugs that have to do with these riots, right? So I'm not talking about the protesters. There's people carrying signs. You get swept up in it. That things happen, right? But we're not talking about protesting anymore. These really aren't protests. They're riots, right? They're dying to set up these shooting situations and force all these conflicts to the brink.
Yeah, and the reporting on this is that, I mean, you can go back to, what was it, Al Velshi, he was reporting about in Minneapolis, while he was standing in front of the burning buildings, with all that stuff behind him.
Fiery, but mostly peaceful.
Yeah, well, and that, right, this has come back, this happened with CNN, and then there was that tweet from Chris Cillizza about, criticizing Trump, but it was all with the fires burning in the background. Right. It's like, what kind of a disconnect are these? What reality are they in here?
Chris Cillizza's was inexplicable. It's like, what are you even talking about? And I get people all the time telling me on social media, there's really no riots in Portland. The lady told me the other day, it's like, well, I just saw people ride by on their bikes. And it's like, well, it's 12:30 in the afternoon, so do 12:30 in the morning, right? And there's bike tours going through Portland at 12:30 in the morning, unbothered by protesters. Put that film on video. We'd all like to see it, right? But that's not what's happening. Every night they're going out trying to destroy the city, get into the mayor's apartment, break into these buildings, burn things down, loot, take other people's property. There's now, there are people trying to make the intellectual case for looting. It's like, oh, they got insurance, the stores get their money back. You're not really taking anything that's needed. And, this is a statement, and otherwise people won't hear our statement. It's like, this is other people's property. And in the United States, the government's job is to protect our property. So, what's going on now is the election is headed toward being a referendum on the 10th Amendment. If Trump wins, then that's the people of America saying, we do want the federal government to come in and crack down on these riots and make them end. We do want the federal government to overrule our governor on coronavirus rules, right? Mask rules, stay home rules, school closure rules, right? We do want Washington to take the lead and stop these things that are holding back the country. And I think if I'm a Democrat governor and, this comes in on election night and it's, 60% Trump and he carries 45 states, I'm going to read the music there and I'm going to start singing about opening things up.
Yeah, the thing too about this is just like, so Trump goes off to Kenosha, but we had Governor Evers, the Democrat, and then his lieutenant governor and the mayor of Kenosha was like, no, don't come because you're only going to make things worse. You're only going to upset things even worse. And the thing, but there isn't anybody there. There isn't a public official that has actually tried to really quell all of this stuff.
Right.
Right. And
what did he do when he got there? Okay, he went and met with very local people and the local police, and there was a symposium. I guess they had a couple of academics there talking about managing police forces and reducing violence, and what happened in Kenosha. How do you interact with the community and heal the wounds and so forth? He's there. Evers is not there. The mayor is not there. The president is. He's the one rolling up his sleeve trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, and that's the thing that people should remember is that the president is willing to come in there and say, look, we'll provide some relief money and things like that. We got to get you back to where you were, and the business owners were very they're happy about things like that. You mentioned the thing about the insurance, and how the BLM people and say, oh well, they have insurance, so we're making the statement. But the articles that I've read about the looting like in Chicago, there are lots of small businesses that actually found insurance too expensive. So they had no insurance. Their shop gets looted. They've got nothing.
They're wiped out.
They're wiped out unless they, and they have to rebuild. Or in the case of those that have insurance, because they've been looted multiple times, they're trying to figure out what do they claim, because the other side of the coin is that if they file like 2 or 3 claims in a very short period of time, not all of them would get approved probably, and the others, and then B, the chances are that their insurance premiums would skyrocket.
Right. So
they have other issues there. Of course, looters, rioters, those guys, they have no clue whatsoever about any of how this works.
They don't care about the economics or who has insurance or any of that. And what else is happening in Chicago? The Miracle Mile is disappearing, right? Those stores are moving out. No one wants to do business in Chicago right now because, it's such a risk of crime. It's 73 people shot that last weekend.
Yeah.
Think about that. 73 people shot, right? In a town where guns are illegal.
Right. Yeah, and the thing too is that if you read the Biden tweets and the Harris tweets, what seems to be a very common theme is just they keep talking about the number of deaths from COVID, and they blame that on Trump. Kamala Harris comes out and talks about small businesses and things that are going away, and also blames that on Trump and all of this. And I think they're not there's no context to this whatsoever anyway.
None of those people passed civics either, by the way.
Right. Yeah. And I thought, well, in some ways, go ahead and say that, because anybody with an education will look at this and say, you guys are idiots. You have an opportunity to use Twitter to talk about things and define your campaign, and you're talking about this. Marianne Williamson, who was quite the character. She publicly came out and said the Biden team needs to fire whoever's writing his tweets because they're so sophomoric. Right. They're so terrible. So and I thought, hey, I kind of like Marianne Williamson because she was just so out there, but she's right. If you're a Democrat and you're looking at the Biden and the Harris tweets, you're like, whatever, we're wasting our time. We're not saying anything. Like you said, civics, this is just, they're terrible.
Yeah, it's not effective, and they do the heck out of it. I don't know who they think they're talking to, but one thing, Democrats count on low info voters, right?
Yeah.
Like Scott Adams had a tweet the other day. He said, when I'm arguing with people about Biden or Trump, most of the argument is me educating them on what Biden actually says and does and thinks, right? Because they don't know, and what they think is usually incorrect, right? It's just, rolling out the facts, because these opinions are based on, incorrect information. Like, for instance, you mentioned the COVID death totals. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that now, because, the CDC came out and explained this week for the first time that the total number of people who have died from COVID, and that they can positively say died from COVID as opposed to their other comorbidities, right, is about 9,200. It's 9,000, not 180,000, right? About 6% of the total that they have been reporting. And now where does that number come from? This was people coding everything they could code to be COVID in hospitals to get the COVID bonus from the government, right? So, we'll never really know how many people it is, but we now know pretty definitively that 180,000 is at least twice the total number. So if you say 180,000, is that's unacceptable, that's total failure. Okay, what about 90,000, right? What number would you have said, okay, yeah, they did a good job, right? They need to pick that out. They need to figure that out, and explain why. Because 180,000. When they first started this, they said 2.5 million. So 180,000 means that's 9% of 2.5 million. Okay, so if you tell me Trump eliminated 91% of the predicted deaths, that's not a good job. That's a failure. It's like, what numbers are you comparing?
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, the Democrats, the liberal media, I mean, they've been focusing on these numbers without giving any context to this, any explanation as to how breaks down. The fact that, the U.S. is somewhere like 15th in per capita death rate,
and the hardest country to govern for this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a tradition of we do whatever we want and we don't listen to you tell us. And, you remember when this started, there was, for a couple of weeks, everybody kind of stayed home, right? But then after that, it's like, okay, I'll stay home except for this, then except for this and this, and then except for this and this and this. And pretty soon, we're basically living our lives, right? We're not South Korea, where they can say, stay in your house, and everyone just stays in their house, right? We're not that. So, it's a different situation. We're dealing with a different situation than they were, and we've done better than anybody who was dealing with this in anything close to a situation similar to ours.
Yeah, plus, we also have Biden out there who basically has said that, if he gets elected, he'll be listening to the experts, right, about whether or not we should, what we should do, whether or not we should shut down the economy again, that type of thing. It's like, if I'm a voter and I'm hearing a presidential candidate say that I might shut down the economy again after what we've already gone through, and the fact that it's going to take a long time to recover. The economy has been changed in dramatic ways that will take a long time to even remotely resemble this again. I'm running for the nearest exit. I'm voting for the other guy, because it's like, this is, he will absolutely kill this country if he does that. I mean, we're having enough problems as it is, and he's, shut down again. I'm sorry, no, that's a no sale for me.
Right, and he's talking about a nationwide mask mandate. Did he flunk civics too?
Yeah,
right. You don't get to do that. You got to pass a federal law.
Yeah, that's just, and there are going to be people who are just not going to, they're not going to go for that at all.
I wrote on the Twitter about that he with that declaration, he locked up the Karen vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how many of us want to be known as Karens? Some of us, it's my job, make sure everybody follows rules, right? but most of us don't want to think of ourselves as Karens, right? We get mad. Somebody calls you a Karen, you get mad about it, right? Most people get mad about it. They don't want to be known as that. But, that's who he's appealing to, is the Karens.
I was listening to a podcast this morning. It was recorded over the weekend, and there was one of the rotating guests is a black guy who's into technology and photography, and that's what the podcast is really more about, tech issues. But he said that he apparently, I guess on the video, the YouTube broadcast or whatever, if I was watching that, I would have seen apparently he was wearing a T-shirt that should he have a problem or whatever with the police or whatever, you rip off his shirt, and under his T-shirt was like, "I'm actually a white woman and my name is Karen." So even I have to find. I even think that's kind of funny. It's just like to do all of that. Answer me this: is Joe Biden for fracking or against fracking?
Well, it depends on who and where when you ask him, right? Seems to change. Hey, Biden said in a debate with Bernie that he would end all domestic energy exploration on day one of his presidency. People write me, even well-meaning conservatives, he just means he will phase this out. No, that may be what he means, but what he said was, day one, that's it. We're done with fossil fuels on day one of his presidency. It's like, okay, renewables account for about 11% of the energy in the United States. So 89% of our energy will be gone on day two of a Biden presidency. Now, I guess I'll take it, there's a strategic reserve, and it'll take a few days before we actually use all the oil we have. But within it, by Thanksgiving, we'll be down to 11% of our energy, right? If Biden is elected and keeps his word on what he wants to do about energy production. The problem about that Biden is people come up to him and say these things, and he just agrees. He doesn't stop and think about it. It's like, why? That's why he trapped himself into having to name a woman VP, right? So will you commit to doing that? Any politician worth his salt says, well, I'll certainly look at women, and I'm all for advancing women, but I'm not going to limit it because I'm going to pick the best person for the job. It's a standard answer. Anybody in any party knows that answer and knows to give it, right? Don't nail down who you're going to pick, right? But he didn't, and he doesn't know how to say no to anybody, right? Because all he can think about is earning the immediate approval. He can't really think about, strategically what's best for the country. He's a blank slate. It's like electing a 5-year-old kid president.
Yeah, I don't know. It is. Okay, how about one more thing here, and then we'll close off. So in DC, there was this commission, there was a study that took place over a couple of months, looking at the names of monuments and buildings and whatnot in DC, whether or not it was federal land or property or whether or not it was DC. And they came back, and which actually didn't take them that long. So they went through this pretty darn quickly in terms of making their recommendations. But, I guess their initial recommendation was like, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial. I mean, they had Alexander Graham Bell on this thing, Ben Franklin on this list. Apparently, I guess they backed off a little bit and said that, DC property, not federal property, because they really can't do anything about the federal property anyway.
Trump called them up and said, you will not remove any names from federal property.
Yeah, and I think the Interior Secretary was kind of like over my dead body kind of a comment too about this. But I mean, what is going on in DC? I mean, it's I understand in the sense of these Confederate monuments and whatnot. I mean, that swept the country, and that's become part and parcel, and that's fine, I guess. But this whole thing about taking even a broader view and looking at people, they didn't contextualize this. They owned a slave. Even if they spoke out against slavery later, it doesn't really matter. I mean, what's the deal? Right.
Well, without the work of Washington and Jefferson, there would have been no mechanism to free slaves. The country would have been run not as a popular sovereignty place, but as some kind of dictatorship / monarchy. slash strongman ruler. That was all the world was familiar with at that point in history, right? That's all we knew. Okay, so if those guys came in and said, no, we're going to turn this over to the people, and we are going to put in place ways that things can be changed. And when we discover moral wrongs that are not addressed, we're going to have a step-by-step, here's how you address that, here's how you fix it, right? I mean, that's what the Constitution is. That's what our legal processes are and do. So, no Jefferson, no Washington, no freeing of the slaves to this very day. So the idea that you want to remove them or contextualize them or whatever is ridiculous, right? The more you know about their history, the more you know that they do not deserve this kind of treatment. The other thing is, these cities are run by knee-jerk radicals, and Democrats, Republicans have said, okay, well, we probably can't win in seats in places like DC. I will tell you that when I worked for Tom Davis, he was trying to get DC vote through. He wanted to give them one vote in the House, accelerate the process, and give Utah an additional congressional seat. That way you'd get one of each, in the House, one more Republican vote, one more Democrat vote. What he told Republicans about this is, give me 2 cycles and I will make that seat Republican, right? I will go get the Republican able to win there. And so, I don't know how he planned to do it, but, if you look at the demographics of Washington, D.C. now, a Republican candidacy would not be the, laughing stock it was even 10 years ago, right? You'd have a chance. So, one thing that Republicans need to look at is, these Democrats who have said all these crazy things, it's not just here. Denver, Seattle voted the other day to defund the police completely and have social workers or whatever it is they're going to do. Somebody's going to have to police Seattle. They can all figure that out there or whatever. But, you have a chance to go in there and say, hey, I'm the common sense candidate. I believe that we do need police. I believe that we do need law and order. I believe that we do need to protect property and people from and not run the place with, howling mobs in the streets. So I think that's a winning thing. And I think if Trump, wins big in November, you'll start to see people, fill in those things. But like here in Virginia, there's 143 seats in the state legislature. There's 140 seats, 43 of them in the last election. 43 of the 140 Democrats ran unopposed. That, the Republican Party wants to end this nonsense and help America. They got to put up a candidate in all the races, find people who can run, and you're not going to win at first. You're not going to win. You're not going to win in the near term, but you got to keep banging away on it until you do.
Right. All right. We've reached the end of the show. So 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So I was doing another podcast yesterday talking about college football and, what it takes to bring it back. And while we were taping this show, the President Trump talked to the head of the Big Ten Conference about reopening, and there's some movement on that front. The people of the Big Ten are extremely upset about this and don't see the necessity of closing off football. There was a football game last weekend. I don't think anybody has died yet. I think the country is on the precipice of saying, we're done with these restrictions, and you can keep them in place or you can erase them, but we're not going to follow them anymore. Also, Mike Flynn lost at the in-bank decision, so they'll have to go back. And the point was that the judge had not, in fact, turned down the government's petition to dismiss the case against him. So the ruling that he can't do what he's doing is moot because he hasn't really done anything yet. So that goes back to court, and now, and also they put in there in that ruling that we want this. You've been briefed on all the issues here. Get everybody back in court. Do what you got to do. Make this end. So he promptly goes out and sets court dates for right around the week of the election, right? So that judge is, that was defiant, and I'm anxious to hear if there's any ramifications of waiting that long.
All right. So I'm going to close with this message I received on Twitter. just because this is what you have to watch out for when you're on Twitter. That make sure you send your tweets, your messages to the right person. So I get this message. I read what you said about the RNC and people of color. You're wrong and a jerk. You and the left lie all the time. Every time you open your mouth, and it has to do with our president and his supporters. You even know who you are. There's three things I can't stand in a person: liars, I think it meant thieves, said thrives, and racism. You guys are trying to steal an election with your lies. You guys have no honor. 5 minutes later, I'm so sorry. I got you mixed up with someone else. I sincerely apologize.
Hey, I like people admit their mistakes.
I do. At least she admitted the mistake, but it was hilarious. It's just like, oh gosh, but it was going to be a message, so it didn't go out to the, to the wide world there. But you got to, Twitter is like this. You just got to watch out. People get very angry and they do things, yeah. And the next thing you know, you've done. Usually, what happens with me is not on Twitter, but I will because of text messages, and somebody sends me a text message, and then I see it and I want to respond to it, but in the meantime, like another message had come in from someone else. So what I wind up doing is responding to the last person, not the person I intended, so I have sent several errant text messages to people. Yeah. It's really easy to do because a lot of times you're just in the heat of the moment, you're doing these things very fast. And I'm like, yeah, I got to be, I know I have to be more careful, but I keep doing it nevertheless.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't even tell,
Right. All right. No, that's exactly right. Initially, when you're doing it, it looks like you're sending it to the person you want to. Only when you've actually sent it, you're like, who did I just send that to?
That's right.
I'm glad it's not sensitive information I'm usually winding up dealing with on that. All right, everyone. Thank you always for joining us for this. We probably had probably get more viewers than Joe Biden, so we're happy with that. More engagement than Joe Biden. But please, always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. We will see you again next week.
So